The move to reduce the scourge of littering in Guyana, particularly in the nation's capital, is now in high gear, with much emphasis being placed on enforcing the new litter prevention regulations.
As of January 2015, the agency and its litter enforcement program is moving into a focus of strong enforcement, a little bit directed focus on enforcement. So we have about 12 dedicated litter enforcement, or what we call litter wardens, available, and we are moving into authorizing the police, the city constabulary, members of the Ministry of Health, as well as some of the members of the local democratic organizations across the country. As of February 2015, we're going to start focusing on some small manageable areas that gives us a little bit more focus in terms of full enforcement. We're no longer worrying about education awareness. We believe that people already has enough information and they are fully aware of the laws in terms of litter prevention regulations and what are the offenses, and hence we're now moving into strong enforcement. So the officers of the agency, the litter wardens, will be placed in the city at key locations, and they'll be looking for the itinerant litterers, looking for those people who are dumping, looking at the businesses that are giving people the vagrants and what's not, the various garbage to dump around the place. I mean, the country continues to be in a very terrible state, particularly the capital city. It's a lot of garbage around, but I just want it to be clear and known that the agency is coming very strongly in enforcement. So we're no longer giving you time, saying, oh yes, you made an error and you can go and clean up and no fine. This time we're coming with fines, strong fines, $50,000, $100,000, including jail time. So we're very strong and very serious about ensuring that the enforcement aspect is rolled out over the next 2 months or so.
The Environmental Protection Agency is also embarking on various campaigns to educate the public regarding littering and the proper disposal of garbage.
As part of the enforcement as well, we are going into a very strong name and shame promotion. So anybody caught littering or committing an offense under the litter prevention regulations, we're going to put them in the newspapers, highlight them in the media, all media, in the television, radio, and the newspapers. So the name and shame is basically highlighting what the offense is, who committed it, where, and what are the penalties attached to it. So it's not we issuing the fine to the local democratic organizations, but giving them a cleanup order, and then the court decides on what is the necessary penalties provided for the litter prevention regulations. Officers are also going to be patrolling these areas that are noted for significant garbage and dumping and littering. For example, the kitty seawalls on the weekends. So we're going to have our officers there patrolling that area during on Sunday afternoons and looking to catch anybody that are actually littering.
The EPA will be working with the private sector, the mayor and city council, and other stakeholders to ensure that the city remains clean.
We're looking to develop, and as part of the strategy, which we haven't really gone into it in the first half of last year, but we intend to ensure we have what we call businesses against litter. So we're working with businesses, for example, along the North Road area in Albertown, so that the EPA, along with the main city council and the private sector, coming together and say, let's clean up an area or adopt an area and maintain that area and monitor that area. So the businesses will provide receptacles, they will keep it clean. The EPA will ensure that enforcement is part of that thing, to make it a demonstration project to see that, okay, that the private sector and the public sector can come together and deal with a particular area. I mean, recently also, the latter part of last year, particularly in November, December, you would have noticed that the Stabroek market and the border market were significant problems in terms of garbage and so on. Well, the MNCC has its problems in terms of the trucks breaking down and what's not. But we have worked strongly with the with the solid waste director and the city engineer to ensure that there is regular cleanup in that area, and we're working getting the businesses in that North Road area to contribute to that that particular dump site where, well, it was a former dump site. We've now got it clean so that we can beautify it, plant trees and what's not to ensure it is a nice beautified area.
Litter not only defaces the natural environment, it is also unhealthy and irresponsible. Don't you want to enjoy the beauty and enormous services our environment offers? Then why not be the change you want to see? Let us work together to eliminate the repulsive habit of littering.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
Littering is unhealthy and unsafe to both humans and animals. It is not our government or city council that has the only responsibility to keep our city clean. We also, as citizens, have a responsibility not to litter.
The only way the garbage can get out on the streets is if we, the people in our country, throw the garbage out there. No bottle, don't walk out and get on the street.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
Apart from businesses assisting with garbage disposal, the agency is also working with the Ministry of Local Government.
Apart from the businesses against litter, there is also the aspect of working along with the Ministry of Local Government and their Georgetown Cleanup or 1 Billion Cleanup campaign. So they've used the community pride, sort of community participation in cleanup certain areas in Georgetown and across the country. So the EPA is lending support to that program by ensuring that our enforcement officers are patrolling on a daily basis along those areas that are cleaned up by the community, and lend support to the community as well to ensure that there's enforcement. What we've also done is focus on the waste contractors, the Sevons and the Puran brothers. They have various wards in which they are responsible for collecting garbage, household garbage in particular. But we are going after them or encouraging them to ensure that as part of their contract, I think it was reflected in the contract with the MNCC, that bulky waste along the parapets and so on, they're supposed to be collecting those things. So despite people are dumping, these solid waste contractors are required to ensure that they keep the place clean, collect the garbage wherever they see it. So EPA and the enforcement unit is going to be following closely and ensuring that they do that aspect. But that is not encouraging people to continue to dump. We're looking for the dumpers as well. When we catch them, then the law will be applied.
The environmental body has mapped out the city of Georgetown and highlighted areas known for high incidence of garbage dumping.
We have mapped out the city of Georgetown and highlighting particular areas that are known for high incidence of dumping and littering, particularly the commercial areas. And so those areas will be the focus over the next 3 months, and the litter wardens will be patrolling that area very visibly in their uniform to ensure that those areas are monitored and the relevant actions are taken for enforcement. We also want to build our relationship, and focus is building our relationship with the police force, with the Guyana Police Force, some community policing groups as well as some of the local community groups and churches and faith-based organizations, that we're building their capacity as voluntary litter wardens. So that those voluntary litter wardens will build and assist in terms of the number of persons being available for ensuring enforcement is taking place. But we want to ensure that the police and the Guyana Police Force and the other agencies that are authorized under litter prevention regulations to take actions and enforce those regulations. So it's not only the EPA litter wardens, but the police, the health officers, the officers of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, officers of the Guyana Forestry Commission. So those agencies like the GGMC and the Guyana Forestry Commission, wherever they are in the interior, those officers, the mines officers and the forestry officers, can enforce those regulations, and I'm hoping that they will continue to do that. But the key thing is building the relationship with the City Constabulary, the Guyana Police Force, the community policing groups, and the community level groups to ensure that there is for the capacity to ensure enforcement.
Since the litter enforcement regulations were enacted in 2014, the agency has seen significant success.
In terms of the implementation phases of the regulations, we have had cause to issue upwards of 200 citations under the regulations, and there have been a number of matters that have gone through the court process, including 2 successful prosecutions. There was one instance where a business owner was made to pay $1,000 in damages under the regulations for actually physically dumping litter, and also for then attempting to bribe a litter warden. So from a strictly enforcement standpoint, the agency has enjoyed roughly, I would say, 90% compliance in terms of the citations that were issued under the regulations. The biggest challenge that the agency faces, and I think any agency would face under similar circumstances in terms of a large-scale enforcement undertaking of this scale and of this magnitude, is in terms of consistency. Not just consistency in terms of actual compliance, but in terms of the level of compliance, or at least at a level with which the agency is satisfied. The original thrust in terms of us launching the regulations, it was geared towards a mass aggressive awareness campaign in terms of informing stakeholders and members of the general public in terms of the substantive content of the regulations and the penalties for breaches of the substantive content of the regulations.
The agency is of the view that since the program has been in existence for over a year, the public has sufficient knowledge of litter regulations.
We feel that given that the program has been in existence for close to a year, the public has a general working knowledge of the content of the regulations and of at least the mere existence of the regulations. So the policy directive was made at the beginning of this year to shift the focus from a mass awareness perspective to an actual enforcement directive. That means we have actually decided to amplify our enforcement initiatives. We have noticed since the program has actually rolled out that there have been a lot of repeat offenders in terms of persons who were originally issued citations under the regulations, and they've complied with it, but some weeks later they've actually fallen back into the same activities. Under this new policy directive that focuses on enforcement, any repeat offender will be brought before the court. So a citation will be issued within which you have to comply with the cleanup order within a specified time frame, and we will also be proceeding to court. We also want to target specific activities of littering, particularly those activities involving illegal dumping at makeshift dump sites, dumping activities where vagrants are recruited by business persons to discard of the refuse without them being given any warning or any information in terms of how to responsibly dispose of the garbage. In that situation, we can come after the vagrant and we can come after the business person.
Are you aware that littering is an unhealthy practice? Change begins with one. Let us all work together for the change we all wish to see. A clean, healthy Guyana.
Pick it up, do not litter, and encourage others to do the same.
Come on, Guyana, pick it up. Littering is not good.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
In the daily course of our lives, we see garbage all around, strewn along our streets. We must start disposing of our garbage in an acceptable way and restore Guyana and Georgetown to be a clean country.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
In focusing on enforcement, the EPA has assembled a legal team that will be prosecuting matters before the court.
The agency has assembled a team that will be dedicated to the actual prosecution of matters before the court. This includes a dedicated legal person, as well as an administrative and environmental person in the form of a senior environmental officer, who will be responsible for coordinating the matters that are going to be before the court, gathering the evidence, assembling the witnesses, and then also ensuring that these matters are proceeded to court and are moved through the court system in a swift fashion.
The agency has also been taking steps to educate and inform the public on the new litter prevention regulations.
Public relations efforts on the litter regulations for 2014 were delivered through mass media. So there were a number of radio interviews being conducted, a series of newspaper articles were published. In 2015, the Ministry and the Environmental Protection Agency intend to interact more with persons on the ground, with communities and with businesses. There are 3 key projects that will be undertaken during the first quarter of this year. The Name and Shame campaign, of course, takes priority because we've moved beyond the stage of the hand-holding where we just tell people it's wrong to litter. So for at least the first half of 2015, you should expect to see, especially in the daily newspapers, a lot of articles concerning persons who would have been issued notices, persons who have to appear before the courts. And of course, that's all part of the Name and Shame campaign. So the businesses, the individuals, the various organizations, ministries who continue to litter, this information now will be made available to the public. There's also the Green Spaces project, where we will engage non-governmental organizations and particularly youth groups to create spaces in urban areas to improve the aesthetics. So expect to see dump sites being transformed into areas planted with beautiful flowers, with seating arrangements, just spaces where persons can go and relax and unwind.
A key plan for 2015 has been the rollout of the Litter Enforcement Unit.
In 2015, there will be the national rollout of the Litter Enforcement Unit. Meetings have been conducted with local authorities in Bartica, Linden, Berbice, and on the Essequibo Coast, and litter wardens will be hired and placed in these areas as part of strengthening the enforcement of this key national legislation. So the public is reminded that the fines for littering are pretty steep. For individuals, it's $50,000, and for business entities, it's $100,000. There's also fines attached for the owners of public transportation and for persons who pay other persons or cause other persons to litter. So the public is urged to report cases of littering and illegal dumping, and they can do so on the hotline number, which is 600-0620. They can send an email to greenguyana@gmail.com. They can report incidences on our Facebook page, which is Anti-Litter Guyana. They can send a tweet at Clean Guyana. So there are numerous forms or numerous platforms for the public to inform us, give us that feedback, not only to report incidences of littering, but also to say what their groups or what their communities have been doing to improve the waste management situation in Guyana.
The agency is calling on the public to assist in the fight against littering.
I'm urging members of the public, members of volunteer organizations who have a passion and who are interested in seeing Guyana being transformed to that beauty that it once was, to make contact with the litter unit or make contact with the ministry to be trained as volunteer litter wardens. A number of workshops would have already been conducted in Georgetown and in other coastal areas. And if you feel that passion, if you want to see the change that we so badly need, then feel free to contact us.
U.S. Caribbean Energy Summit can be considered a success and with the potential for many areas of cooperation between Caribbean states and the U.S. It was very heartening to see that the Vice President and his team, including the Secretary of Energy, as well as representatives from the Department of State, took their time to go through many of the issues of concern to the region. One of the areas that was dealt with extensively was the area of climate change, and there was a very frank and open discussion as to the U.S. roles and U.S. involvement in ensuring that in Paris this year that we have an agreement that will further the world's aspiration in terms of ensuring that commitments are made and action taken to deal with the climate crisis. It was reassuring that the U.S. itself was ready to take some bold steps, as we've seen demonstrated with its agreement with China and more recently with President Obama's engagement in India. But certainly the Caribbean leaders and Caribbean states pressed the U.S. to ensure that its commitments were solid, and recognizing too that Caribbean states, small island developing states, had unique exposure, unique risk, and required support both in terms of adaptation as well as mitigation. And there was commitment from the U.S. to work both at the multilateral level as well as the bilateral level to pursue those. And so there was that frank and open discussion. Guyana, certainly, our team led by the Prime Minister, raised the issue in terms of REDD Plus as one of the cheaper and much more practical ways in terms of reducing and mitigating climate change. And that's certainly an issue that came up in our deliberations. The other aspect too, and very important, was how it is that we move the energy agenda forward and ensuring energy security and not having this sole dependence on fossil fuel in terms of also looking at supply. And a number of options were put on the table, as was stated in the joint statement. One was just in terms of support for renewable energy, alternative sources of energy, and efforts being undertaken by Guyana and other states. Take, for instance, our efforts in dealing with the issue of developing hydropower as well as other sources of renewable energy. And we certainly highlighted the need for continued support, especially by the U.S. in terms of voting the IDB and other multilateral issues to support projects in Guyana as well across the region that will see us getting the necessary support to move our renewable energy agenda forward, because one, it's good for the economy, but also would help and deal with the issue, the global issue of climate change. And so there was that positive response also in dealing with that. There are many areas that will have to follow up, and there are a number of other meetings have been scheduled, both in terms of looking at the climate issues, but also dealing with looking at long-term support and the involvement of the private sector, greater coordination at the multilateral level in terms of supporting countries such as ours in dealing with our unique vulnerability in terms of ensuring energy and the steps that we are taking as we're doing with Amila and examining other projects. And so that certainly received the type of broad support, but certainly the follow-up efforts and ensuring that what countries such as ours and others within the region are doing will certainly receive support. We've seen, and as was presented, a number of other models where other countries are moving very aggressively. Some countries have been able to move within the region to have their non-fossil source of energy moving to about 80% alternative energy, whether it's geothermal, solar, wind, or hydro. Many countries have committed themselves to increasing, as it were, the percentage of power source coming from non-fossil, whether it's hydro, solar, wind, geothermal. And certainly that fits into Guyana and our government's policy. And so it was heartening to see that what we are doing nationally is in fact part of that wider strategic view for the region, and what the U.S. also wants to collaborate with countries in the U.S. in terms of partnership in developing and preparing us and ensuring that we have energy security. And I think that was a very important takeaway point, that we ourselves in Guyana, we are on track, and it certainly is consistent with what the region is doing and what the U.S. and a number of multilateral agencies were there, the World Bank, the IDB, the OAS itself, and there were also a number of financial opportunities and steps and commitments being taken to support strategic interventions that we're making to ensure energy security, and also having a clean source as well as renewable source. And so the meeting itself was filled with possibilities, a lot of work to be done in moving this forward, and I'm quite sure the follow-up efforts and the leadership offered and the discussion certainly will allow us to move the region to a better level, a better position as it relates to energy security.
I like to encourage people to take your garbage and take it home with you if you have to. You don't have to throw it on the streets.
Littering is not advisable, it's not healthy, and it's not right, so please don't litter.
When we litter, we damage our environment. We destroy the marine life. Let us protect our environment and more so bring back Guyana to the beauty that it once was and it can surely be.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
I just think that littering is very bad, and I think that we all as Guyanese should just stop littering, get a piece of garbage, just put it in a bin and that's it.
We should help come out and keep the city clean.
Do the right thing, put it in a bin, throw the tin in the bin.
Stop littering. Do the right thing.
Check us out on the internet for this and every episode of Eldorado Shines. Just go to YouTube, search for Eldorado Shines and start watching. Or like us on Facebook and receive instant updates. You've been watching Eldorado Shines. Be sure to join us again next week for another program. Until then, do remember that we all have a role to play in protecting the environment.